Rain lashed against the windows. Wind howled like a lonely wolf. Inside his small house, Thomas sat alone. His heart felt as heavy as the storm clouds above. He missed his family, he missed his friends, he missed the feeling of someone needing him. A sudden thump at the door startled him. He peered through the window. A small wet dog huddled on his porch. It whimpered, shivering in the cold. Thomas hesitated. He wasn't sure he was ready for the responsibility, but the dog's eyes, filled with fear and hope, touched something deep within him. He opened the door a crack. "Come here, boy," he said softly. The dog, as if understanding his kindness, crept inside. Thomas grabbed an old towel. He dried the dog's matted fur. The dog, small and brown, leaned into his touch, a low growl rumbling in its chest. It was a growl of gratitude, Thomas thought. He smiled. The dog, which Thomas named Max, settled into his life surprisingly well. He was a quiet companion, content to sit by Thomas's feet as he read. Max never barked or begged for attention. He offered a silent understanding that Thomas craved. Before Max, Thomas rarely left the house. He avoided the townspeople, their pitying glances a constant reminder of his loneliness. But with Max by his side, he felt a newfound confidence. They started with short walks to the end of the lane. Soon they were exploring the nearby woods, Max sniffing at every tree and Thomas breathing in the fresh air. He found himself smiling more, his steps lighter. One sunny afternoon they encountered Mrs. Peterson, an elderly neighbor, tending her garden. Max wagged his tail, approaching her cautiously. Mrs. Peterson, usually shy, knelt down and scratched Max's ears. Thomas and Mrs. Peterson, brought together by a shared love for the dog, began to chat. It was the start of many conversations. The days grew shorter, but Thomas's life felt brighter. Max, with his clumsy paws and soulful eyes, had unlocked a part of Thomas that he thought was lost. He discovered joy in the simplest of things: morning walks, sharing a meal, the warmth of Max's fur against his hand on a cold evening. Their walks through town became longer. People stopped to pet Max, their faces softening as they spoke to Thomas. He wasn't invisible anymore. He was Max's dad, and that simple title filled him with pride. Children, drawn to Max's gentle nature, giggled as he chased fallen leaves. Their laughter was a melody that chased away the silence that once haunted Thomas's days. Max, his silent companion, had given him a voice. One crisp morning, Thomas woke to an empty house. Max was gone. Panic seized him. He searched the house, calling for his friend. Then he ran into the street, his heart pounding. He saw Mrs. Peterson, her face etched with worry. "I heard you calling," she said. "We'll find him, Thomas." And so began a frantic search. The townspeople, their faces grim, joined in. They looked in gardens, behind shops, and along the riverbank. Hours later, a young boy emerged from the woods, a triumphant grin on his face. "I found him!" he shouted, Max bounding behind him, tail wagging. Relief washed over Thomas, tears stinging his eyes as he embraced his lost companion. That night, back in the warmth of his home, Thomas looked around at the faces gathered there. Neighbors, shopkeepers, even children he barely knew. They had come together for him, for Max. And in that moment, Thomas knew he wasn't alone. He had found a family in the most unexpected way.